Welcome. My name is Georgette Norman, Director of Troy University Rosa Parks Museum. And I'm really excited about today's program because I'm here with the curator for the museum at my extreme left, Viola Moten, and one of Montgomery's own, Pat Baptiste Brown, who is featured in our coming exhibit, which is Quilts by Pat Baptiste Brown. Baptiste grew up in Montgomery, Alabama, and found herself all the way in Seattle, Washington, where she started quilting. But I want to just first talk about where you grew up here, Pat, and give us a little bit about your growing up here and your background.
Okay. I grew up in Montgomery in Sheridan Heights.
Okay.
Which was a pretty busy little area. Friends who were, I guess, constantly around me, and I managed to do a quilt that included those friends. But I went to Booker Washington, graduated from Booker Washington.
Okay.
And from there I went to Southern University in Baton Rouge. But those years of high school and junior high were spent here in Montgomery.
And I think at that time, Sheridan Heights was considered a pretty good little ways away.
Yeah, it was. It was basically outside the city, North Montgomery.
Yeah, I remember during that time. So you went to junior high school at Booker T. Washington and high school, and then you went off to college. Now, were you in home economics or that kind of thing?
No, I was in what did they call my program? It was college prep, I think.
Okay,
and
college prep.
I was in that track. And from graduating from Booker Washington, I went to Southern University, and that was.
And what was your area at Southern?
Southern, I started out in political science, ended up in education. For some reason, I took a class that I really liked, and it got me interested in education, and that's where I moved from journalism and political science to education.
Well, it's very interesting because we're sitting here on this set, and we don't see political science, and we don't see education. We see quilts.
Right.
Now, quilts have been said to be the comfort food of art. You know, it kind of like feeds our soul. It's utilitarian, but it's also kind of, you know, artsy, and it keeps us warm, and it gives us that sense of who we are. It gets kind of nostalgia. You know, it reminds us of where we've been, from whence we come. And how did you get into this quilting thing?
First of all, it's all of those. I started quilting when I was in Seattle. I was at a fabric store at a midnight sale and saw a friend there who was purchasing fabric for quilts. And she asked me if I were interested. I said, sure. She invited me to join the group. And never having quilted before, I joined the group. And that was the eye-opener that got me started on the road to quilting.
No, that's interesting, because when I was reading your artist statement, you said, fabric is my addiction. Now, anybody that would be at a fabric show at midnight, fabric is your addiction.
It's addiction.
So explain that addiction to fabric.
It's when I pass by a fabric store, if I have $1 in my pocket, I have to stop and go in and give them that $1. It may be to buy a piece of fabric, a tiny piece of fabric. It may be to get a spool of thread, but I have to get in that store and get rid of that $1.
So do you find yourself having to avoid fabric stores?
Having to avoid going in the area where there's a fabric store.
That's amazing. Now, when we talk about the idea of fabric, when you think about quilts, or when I think about quilts, I'm always wondering, what comes first? Do you get the fabric and begin to say, oh, wow, this can become? Or do you have an idea, and it's like, then you begin to look for the fabric? What's your process?
Both of those. One, I am a fabricaholic in that I go into a fabric store and I look at fabrics and I start pulling fabrics off the shelf and I start getting them. So that becomes a part of my stash. And when I
Even the
see
language of addiction.
and I look at that fabric and I say, I can think of something that I can do with this. And I start putting pieces together. Then there are other times when I have an idea in mind for something that I really want to make, and then I start hunting fabric. The hardest part for me, though, is hunting fabrics for an idea that I have. It's easier to go in and purchase pieces of fabric not knowing what I'm going to do with them. And then at some point thinking, oh, I have this. Let me see what I can find to go with that. And I end up at that point coming up with ideas. I might get those pieces and then at that point decide what I'm going to make. But that's the best way for me. A lot of people plan what their projects will be. I very seldom plan a project.
Oh, spontaneous. Well, what's interesting when you think of quilts also, it's, you know, it's like that, you know, your fabric is so different. No flowers, you know, no little children play, you know, none of the stuff that you normally think about when you think about a quilt. So are there particular kinds of fabric you're drawn to more than others?
Yes, I like fabrics, Bali. That there's a country that these fabrics come from, and the place is called Bali, and I like those fabrics.
Like batiks?
Yes,
Yeah,
batiks.
okay.
Those are those are my very favorite. And then I like to get fabrics that are very colorful. Maybe some that have designs that are unusual. Fabric with flowers don't really get me, but things in nature that may be flowers or leaves or whatever, I can use those same fabrics that don't have flowers and leaves to make flowers and leaves. And I like movement, people moving.
Okay. Thematically, are there particular themes that you do when you do quilts? Would you say that there's an overall theme to your work?
Not really. I just do what interests me at the time. However, as I said, I do like movement, people and movement. A lot of those, you'll see a lot of that in in a lot of my quilts.
Well, there's something that's very interesting as you look at your work. Traditionally, in many African traditions, and even today, you find that applique is a process. However, most applique is going to be kind of sewn on a piece of something, either a family event, something that denotes the birth in the family, or a marriage, or a wedding, you know, something major that kind of tells the story of the history of the family. Yet your work also uses an applique process, but a different kind of way. Can you kind of talk about how you came to the process?
You know, a lot of times I buy fabrics and have no idea that they will be used in applique. But because I like movement and people, I use those fabrics to do applique. And I don't do flowers. Again, I don't, there are very few things that I do except people in motion. And I found out that most of the appliques that I have done have involved people in motion. There's one that I have, what is it called? Something dance. And there are two women that have outstretched hands, and their movements are very fluid, and it's something that you don't often see in applique. Then I have another one that all of the people on the quilt are in motion in different, really strong stands. There's another one that I have that has a baby, and it's just the baby sitting there, but it's you can see motion. So just about everything I have that is an applique involves motion, except sometimes when I'm doing a special quilt. For instance, I did a quilt. A young man asked me to do a quilt. His mother was ill, and they weren't expecting her to live. And the quilt on the main piece of the quilt had I think it was a shaman, and that was the only one that I have not done that had motion in it. The shaman is standing with his cloak covering himself, and he's very still, and it is one that it was unusual, but I liked it.
But as shaman, he's also emitting energy.
Yes.
So that still is that motion.
That's right.
that you get into. But I found that very interesting in terms of how you applique, as opposed to traditional applique.
What I use a material called what is it? It's steamacine, and I get my picture or whatever I'm going to use, and generally I start out with a picture that may be that small, and I go and have it enlarged. Then I take this steamacine. On the back of it, I draw my picture and then cut it out. You pull the paper off the back. After you cut it out, you have to pull the paper off the back. Then you iron it on. And at that point, on your fabric, whatever your design, your background may be. And at that point, I then sew around it using my sewing machine. A lot of people use a needle, and which is very time consuming. I can't do it because I stick my finger, and I just don't have the patience to do it.
Oh, well, that makes sense. It's you saying I hurt myself.
Yeah.
I hurt myself. It's just too slow. I want to see it immediately.
Exactly. and doing it on the sewing machine is fairly quick, but you have to be very precise, at least with the kind that I do. I sew very close to the edge, and I like to be sure that I'm including every piece of that embroidery, of that piece that I'm doing. And so it sometimes may take a lot of time, because sometimes you have little pieces that are very small, and I want to go around it so that it lays flat when I finish. And that may take a little time.
That sounds very tedious. With your hand, you can like see it and put it there. With a machine, I don't even want to go there. That sounds very tedious to me. But I'm finding that as I look at some of the work, we chose the ones that are behind us as backdrops specifically. And when you told me you were going to do a college quilt, a T-shirt quilt, and then you said, I'm going to focus on HBCUs, which are the historically black universities in Alabama. I was thinking, okay. But then I look at this quilt, and I didn't realize there were as many as there are, and to realize that there are even more than this. These are the ones you could actually get a T-shirt from.
Right. There's one more I think I couldn't get a T-shirt for. Didn't really have that name, because what I did was a lot of the T-shirts for the HBCUs list the HBCUs on the back, and for a long time Alabama still has the most HBCUs within the state. But there was one that I had not noticed, and then finally when I started doing the quilt and had basically put it together, another one was listed. And so a friend suggested I make a pillow to go with it, and I think that's what I'm going to do.
That's really sweet. But that is just, and it's such a tribute.
It was fun.
And so I guess the idea of you being in education, this becomes your education quilt. Very good. We have the exhibit will be from March 1 through May 27th, which is a nice long time.
April.
May 27th.
May?
We extended your time.
Oh. How about that?
Come, girl. You know, we have to do you justice here. And we did want, at the same time, we wanted to have enough time to really have some activities around it, to look at quilting, to get people seeing the process, seeing your process as well,
sure.
to meet and to talk with you and that kind of
Sure.
thing. And Val, want to tell us some of the activities that are coming up around her exhibit?
Yeah, we have several activities actually. The exhibit will open on March the 1st, and that'll be open to the public on that day. But on Saturday, March the 12th, we're going to have a gallery talk featuring Pat Batiste-Brown. It starts at 11, and it's going to last until noon. And she'll just be there to present a lecture, kind of giving her background, and then can also take you through the gallery and show you the quilts and also speak on the quilts themselves. And then we're also having several workshops for youth, and we're involving specific youth groups in the Montgomery area. So we're going to work with ECHO, and that's going to take place on March 12th. And they'll be creating quilts at the museum. And then I believe we're going to have one with the Goode Street Community Center and another youth group. So we're really excited to be working with the young people in the city and really getting them involved with this exhibit.
That sounds exciting.
Well, it really is exciting. I think that the idea of producing something from your hand, and the idea of having an idea.
Sure.
You know, and as you talked to me about, you know, I was asking you earlier, does the idea come first or does the fabric come first? And as the young people get that, I think you're going to do 9-inch squares, whatever the squares are, they would determine, you know, what comes to them, how it comes,
Right, yes.
or if they have an idea, and then they would choose. But it'd be really interesting to look at what their process is, and to look at how their process compares to your process.
Right.
And also to begin to look at how we're all individuals, but looking at being creative. And I think the thing that what I was very concerned about was that you said that you didn't quilt in high school.
No.
Did your family quilt?
You know, my mother did quilts, as I said, when I was a really small child. And when I say a small child, I remember crawling under the quilt and looking up through the holes, you know, the light shining through the holes. But there was not any quilting going on.
Okay.
No.
And at that point, you hadn't developed your fabric addiction.
Exactly. I developed my fabric addiction when I got in college because I started sewing and I made clothes for myself. But when my quilt addiction came along, that sewing clothes went out the window.
Now, how did you learn to sew?
I basically taught myself. A girl across the street wanted a blouse, and so we went and bought a pattern. My mother had a sewing machine. My mother sewed, and so I really didn't try to sew at that point. But when this girl wanted the blouse, we read the pattern, and I basically sewed it. And my mother didn't even have to give me any help because I read that pattern and I made the top, and that was the start of the sewing from high school on through college, on through my years as a teacher. I made, I'd say, 98 to 95% of my clothes, including making tailored clothing. And I remember the man who was the assistant principal at my school asked me to make some sports coats for him. I had never made any, and I made 2 sports coats for him. Made one for my husband also. And it was when you had that really thick knit fabric.
Yes.
And I made those coats. And so that continued until I met the woman in the fabric store at the midnight sale.
That is amazing. So you were really into fabric.
Yes.
So at that point, you joined a quilting
quilting
club
group.
or something?
It was a quilting group.
Okay.
With members, and we would meet at each other's house every month.
Okay.
And then when we had meetings between those times, we would meet at, say, a firehouse or a library or somewhere where people would allow us to quilt the whole day, and then as a group we would get together and quilt. And the good part about that was that you had other people there that could help you or that could give you tips on what you were doing, because at that time I knew absolutely nothing about quilting. And it was because of the women in that group that I learned to quilt. And I really, even taking classes after that was a big deal, and was very helpful in my learning to quilt.
Now, is this the same group that you were with in Seattle?
Yes.
Now, is this the group that gifted the museum?
Yes.
The quilt?
Yes. Yes.
And if any of you have been to the museum, there's a quilt that hangs in the hallway that was gifted by Pat and her quilting group in Seattle. So we are most honored, and it's a beautiful quilt. And that whole process, that applique with the peeling and stuff, it's just absolutely beautiful.
The tradition with our group is that if you do an exhibit as a group, we give the museum a piece that we have. The piece that we gave them was, it was unbelievable. Each person made strips, quilted strips, long, short, whatever, and we made as many as we could. Each person, there were about 25 people in the group, and then they were placed on some muslin, and they hang. And so when each person, it's just amazing at the number of people who did such different designs. And so when you hang those up together, it just makes something that you could not believe possible. And so that piece was given to the museum.
Wow.
And they hung it at when you came in, that was the first thing you saw.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Now, you were part of an exhibit that was, did a catalog called Stories That Cover Us.
Yes.
And I think this is so beautiful because quilts do that. They cover us, they keep us warm.
Right.
You know, we use them to cuddle and that kind of thing. What was that exhibit? Was that a part of this Seattle quilting group?
That was it's the same quilting group, but the one I just spoke of was at the museum in Tacoma. This one was at the new African American quilt museum and in Seattle.
Okay.
And that's the one that the latest one, Quilts That Cover Us, was made for.
Yeah, and I say it to say that Pat has had a real experience as a quilter. She just doesn't sit at home and just kind of quilt and just kind of give them to her friends. She has been exhibited, and the exhibit of Stories That Cover. I wish we could have gotten that exhibit. It was actually beautiful. But we are most pleased to have you as a solo artist at this point in time. You now make your home in Las Vegas, I think. But you still in Seattle? Because you're in Montgomery a great deal.
This
so you
is
are
my
like,
home.
you
And
have
I'm here as much as I can be here. I'm here basically the whole summer, November and December, and any time in between.
Yeah, I noticed. So you like people say they have dual domiciles. You have like a tri-domiciles, I guess, or something like that. So you're going to be here. You'll be here for the exhibit in Indianapolis because we have you it several times doing that. And we're hoping that people will come in and actually for your gallery talk. 'Cause I think all of us looking forward to being able to hear you talk about the pieces, how they come to be, and what they really mean to you. Because one of the one question I want to ask you is, what does quilting, obviously you said fabric was an addiction, but in terms of quilting, obviously it's soul satisfying.
Yes.
But what does it do for you?
First of all, if I want to relax, all I have to do is pick up a quilting book or start planning a quilt or start working on a quilt. And as I told you, I really don't plan quilts, but I just start on them and they grow. And it really makes me feel that I'm a part of something important, such as quilting, and it's something that people are learning to appreciate. There was a time when we had completely forgotten about quilts. I had. And so when you find something that really moves you, it makes you feel good. You feel good seeing other people appreciate what you are doing, and it calms me. With my having been diagnosed with cancer, talking to you and you saying that I could do the quilt exhibit was one of the best things that happened to me, because when I first got that diagnosis, I couldn't even say the name cancer. And I'm thinking, oh Lord, that's it, I'm doomed. And when you said that I could do that exhibit, I started working, and I have been going since. And my attitude has changed. People talk to me and say, wow, you have a good attitude about this. And they talk about how I am not letting it get me down. And really, it has not gotten me down. I'm able to do these quilts and start working on a quilt anytime I feel like it. I even did a cancer quilt and gave it to a group. And it just makes you feel good. It makes me feel good.
Well, it's been a blessing for the museum. When we feel totally blessed and honored to have you here. And that's one of the reasons I really want to do the workshops for young people, to get them into the process of saying that, you know, what they can do. And the idea of, how do I be still sometimes? You know, how do I get quiet? How do I get into another kind of space that allows me to actually produce something? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Where I can forget about the stuff of the world, whatever it is.
It's very calming.
Yes. So we're really looking forward to that. And not only that, but having the kids actually process. You know, having talked to them before they start the quilting. Like we said, we had kind of forgotten about quilting. What do they think about quilts? Do they have quilts at home? You know, that whole kind of thing.
Right.
And then after going through it, then talk about, you know, how do you feel now? You know, and hopefully, and they're going to have that little squares, you know.
Yeah.
And we might even take, because we're having a tree, a museum tree that we are using now to hang almost anything on. So we might have them say, can we borrow your little squares for just a little while to kind of hang on the tree? So that they then, the young people, become a part of the exhibit, that they can be exhibited in the museum with their quilt squares.
Well, you know, one of the good things about that is having the kids do a square from their own creation, and then take that square, maybe let them do 2 squares, one for the museum and one for themselves, and take that square that they give to the museum and make it into a quilt for the museum.
That would be phenomenal.
I would love to get that going.
Well, that means you have to just, you know, come back. We're so pleased. Bo, you have anything you want to add?
Well, we're just really excited to have your exhibit here. Looking at your quilts, I've seen most of the ones that will be in the exhibit, and they are phenomenal. They kind of break what most people would think of as a stereotypical quilt, because I know coming into it, you have your idea of what a quilt looks like and what it incorporates, but just even taking a look at the quilts behind us, like the one of the women dancing, I mean, it's just gorgeous. Like the movement and the color really kind of just grabs your attention, and I really think it's something that especially young people can grab onto, because it does incorporate ideas that young people can relate to, such as the colors and the dancing, and it shows you that it's something that a lot of people may think of as something done traditionally by maybe older people, or you know, something that's not done currently, but you can make it current, and it's a good skill to have. It's something, you know, I think we've gotten away from creating, you know, art or just creating things with our own hands, because so much of our world is just technology. So we don't get into creating things ourselves. But to go back to that is something that's really special. So I'm really excited. Yeah, it's really fun too.
Well, I'm just thinking now that, Pat, not only are you an artist, you're about to be an activist here as we start this whole new movement of young quilters around. Yeah, we didn't like that idea. And the idea of having a quilt, that gives us another quilt to hang on the wall.
Oh, I know.
So I'm really excited about that. Really excited. So we have Pat Baptiste. We hope that, we know that all your family is coming, and hopefully when your friends begin to see this, they begin to tell everybody else. The exhibit is going to open on March 1. and it's going to run through May 21st. So all your friends and family from around the area, and even from Seattle, can come down
Well,
and check
they
us
are
out.
planning. People from Seattle are planning, and a couple from
Vegas?
Vegas are
This
planning to
is
be
so
here.
exciting. So this is just truly going to be a milestone for us. And we are so excited. And I'm sure all your friends and your classmates that are here, you know, we'd like to have all of them to kind of come and kind of celebrate with us as we present you to Montgomery as an artist activist.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Georgette Norman, Director of the Rosa Parks Museum, here with the curator, Viola Moten, and our guest artist, Pat Baptiste Brown, our own.